Chilling voices, silent lines, panic creeping in as the realization hits. What if the call you're terrified to answer is already coming from where you are? This is not just an urban legend. These are 10 terrifying phone calls that came from inside the house. The Babysitter's Nightmare, one of the earliest known versions of the classic babysitter horror scenario, dates back to the 1950s in Columbia, Missouri. A teenage girl was hired to babysit for a local family. The evening started out like any other: TV, snacks, checking up on sleeping kids upstairs. But around 9 p.m., the phone rang. A man's voice said calmly, "You should check on the children." Thinking it was a prank, she hung up, and the phone rang again minutes later, repeating the same message. Disturbed, she called the operator, who managed to trace the line. The operator frantically called back, "Get out of the house now. The call is coming from another extension inside." When police arrived, they found that the line was connected to an upstairs bedroom. Though the children were safe and no intruder was found, the story quickly circulated through local papers and eventually snowballed into the urban legend we all know today. But the original case was all too real. The Kansas City Caller. In Kansas City, Missouri in 2013, a woman named Lauren was babysitting her 2 young nieces. Around 10 p.m., her phone started ringing. An unregistered number popped up, followed by heavy breathing and then a whisper, "I'm already in here." Lauren laughed it off as a prank, assuming it was one of her friends messaging her. But then the calls kept coming, and each one described in eerie detail exactly what Lauren was doing and what she was wearing, as well as what room she was in. Terrified, she called the police, and officers arrived quickly, swept the home, but found someone hiding in the basement closet. The man had apparently been living in the house for days. He had a burner phone, food wrappers, and even scribbled notes about Lauren and the kids. Somehow, he had cloned her phone and was able to call her from within the house, triggering the nightmare scenario in real life. The Silent Caller. In 2015, a Calgary woman named Amanda began receiving strange calls in the middle of the night. No voice, no sound, just silence. This went on for weeks. She contacted her phone company to block unknown numbers, but the calls kept coming. One night, she stayed with her boyfriend and the calls stopped. That's when he joked, "Maybe it's coming from your own place." Curious, Amanda asked the phone company to trace the origins of the calls, and what they found shook her. Each call originated from her own landline. Even more disturbing, Amanda lived alone. Police searched her apartment and discovered that her crawlspace had been tampered with. Inside, they found a small sleeping bag, food, and a burner phone. Someone had been living under her floor, tapping her phone line. Amanda moved out the next day and never looked back. The Caller in the Closet. Teenager Jessica Harmon was home alone in her family's suburban Chicago home in 2007. Her parents were away for the evening and she spent the night watching horror movies, ironically enough. At around 11 p.m., she got a call from a blocked number. It was a raspy voice that said, "I'm watching you," and she immediately hung up. But over the next hour, the voice returned again and again, with chilling lines like, "I can hear you breathing," and "Don't bother locking the door." Jessica finally called 911, and officers responded within minutes and checked the entire house, finding nothing. But just as they were about to leave, one officer opened the hallway closet and found a man curled inside, holding a prepaid phone. He'd been watching her for hours through the crack in the door, and she had passed by that closet multiple times without even knowing. The Arizona crawlspace intruder. In 2021, a Phoenix woman named Danielle started hearing odd sounds coming from under her home. She thought it might be rodents or faulty pipes. But then she started getting phone calls. The caller would whisper random facts about her, what she was cooking, what she wore to work, and even what she'd Googled that day. Paranoia set in, and she asked a friend to stay over. One night, after another strange phone call, they both heard a loud thump in the basement. They called the police, who arrived to search the home. In the crawlspace beneath the kitchen, they discovered a man who had created a makeshift living space with extension cords, a portable charger, and surveillance equipment. He had tapped into her Wi-Fi and used software to intercept her phone calls. And what's worse is he had even found a way to reroute her number to make it seem like the calls were coming from within the house. The twin stalker case. In 2019, twin sisters Ellie and Grace, both 17, were living in a flat in Manchester. For weeks, they had been receiving eerie phone calls that always came from the same time, 1:33 a.m. The caller never said a word but would play recordings of footsteps, creaking doors, and whispering. It escalated when the girls heard those same sounds in real life, coming from inside the apartment. One night, during yet another call, Grace noticed that the audio matched perfectly with what they were hearing in real time. They barricaded themselves in the bedroom and called the police immediately. Upon arrival, officers found that the calls were coming from a mobile phone left inside the apartment's ceiling vent. Hidden inside the ductwork was a man who had been sneaking into their attic and living above them, possibly for weeks. The girls had unknowingly shared their home with a silent invader. Basement echoes. Married couple Denise and Kyle lived in a quiet St. Louis neighborhood. One night in 2009, they started receiving strange calls, short rings, just enough to make them pick up. No one ever spoke, but each time the line would stay open for minutes. They started to suspect a neighbor or scammer, but then the calls became chilling. Denise heard recordings of her own voice, conversations she had in private, arguments even humming in the shower. When they called the phone company, a technician did a line trace and found that a secondary phone was active in their home. When Kyle followed the wire trail, it led directly into the basement. Inside a sealed storage cabinet, they found a discarded prepaid phone and audio equipment. Someone had been listening, recording, and calling them from inside their own home. And to this day, the case remains unsolved. The Attic Whisperer. A single mother named Yuki in Tokyo began experiencing terrifying disturbances in 2018. After her phone started ringing at odd hours with no one on the line, she assumed it was a wrong number. But then the calls became frequent and specific. The voice on the line whispered her son's name, then her schedule, then threats. The calls were traced to her own apartment. Police searched and found nothing. But Yuki wasn't satisfied, so she hired a private investigator who brought thermal imaging equipment. What they discovered was bone-chilling heat signatures in her attic. Upon entering, they found a man who'd been living there, accessing the home only when Yuki and her son were out. He had tapped her phone line using a parallel connection and even had installed a baby monitor to listen in. Yuki and her son fled the apartment that very same night. The caller who knew everything. Emma, a university student in Sydney, started getting disturbing calls in 2020 during the COVID lockdowns. The caller knew everything: her class schedule, her professors' names, and even her personal journal entries. She lived alone, so it didn't make sense. When she reported it, authorities did a digital sweep of her devices and found no spyware. But when they inspected her apartment, they found a tiny hidden camera above her mirror and a SIM card in her wall outlet hidden behind the cover plate. The person had been calling from inside the apartment complex using a signal booster and cloned number. They eventually tracked down a neighbor who'd hacked into her apartment using maintenance access and installed the surveillance. Every call had come from just a few feet away. The classic urban legend that was real. You've heard the story before, a call from inside the house, but in 2022, it actually happened in Los Angeles. A woman named Tasha was house sitting for her cousin. Around midnight, she got a call from a blocked number. "I'm inside," the voice said. Tasha locked every door, checked every room, and even called the police, who did a sweep and found nothing. But when she got another call saying, "I'm looking at you," she freaked out and ran outside. Officers returned and searched again, this time checking inside the walls. In a hidden cavity behind a false panel in the guest bedroom, they found a man who had rigged a small surveillance room, complete with monitors, a phone line, and cameras. He had been watching her the entire time and making those calls from inside the very walls of the same house. But that's it. Let me know what you guys thought of this video. Leave a like and a comment, and be sure to check out the next video because you won't want to miss it. Thanks again for watching.